The Delhi Metro was a symbol of progress, a network of intricate tunnels and elevated tracks weaving through the heart of the bustling city. Every day, millions of people rode its trains, unaware of the dark history buried beneath the tracks. To them, the metro was a lifeline, a convenient means of commuting through the sprawling metropolis. But hidden in the labyrinth of tunnels, there existed something sinister, something that few had ever witnessed, and those who did were never the same again. It all began on a warm, humid night in June. The day had been stifling, the kind of heat that clung to your skin and made every breath feel heavy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the temperature barely relented. The city hummed with life, and the metro stations were still packed with commuters returning home after a long day's work. Among them was Arjun, a 25-year-old software engineer who had just finished his shift at a tech firm in Connaught Place. Arjun had always been a rational person, someone who didn't believe in ghosts or the supernatural. His life revolved around logic, programming, and the digital world. That night, however, was different. He boarded the last train of the Blue Line, the one that ran from Dwarka to Noida. The train was eerily empty, something he found unusual for a Friday night. There were only a few passengers scattered across the compartments, most of them either lost in their phones or asleep. Arjun settled into a corner seat, his earbuds in, listening to music as the train rumbled forward into the dimly lit tunnels. As the train approached the next station, the lights in the compartment flickered. Arjun glanced up, his attention drawn away from his phone screen. The flickering lasted for a few seconds before the lights stabilized. He shrugged it off as a minor electrical issue, something that occasionally happened on older trains. But as the train pulled into Rajiv Chowk, a chill ran down his spine. The platform was deserted. Rajiv Chowk, one of the busiest stations in the entire metro network, was completely empty. No passengers were waiting, no vendors selling snacks, no security guards patrolling the area. It was as if the entire station had been abandoned. The train doors slid open with a hiss, but no one boarded. Arjun felt an overwhelming sense of unease, but he tried to rationalize it. Maybe the station had closed early for maintenance. The doors closed and the train moved on. As the train sped through the tunnels, Arjun began to notice something odd. The flickering lights had returned, but this time they were accompanied by a strange sound. At first it was faint, like a distant whisper carried on the wind. But as the train moved further, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They seemed to come from all around him, though there was no one nearby. Arjun removed his earbuds, listening intently. The whispers were in a language he couldn't understand, but they filled the compartment, growing more insistent with each passing second. His heart pounded in his chest, and his palms grew sweaty as he looked around, searching for the source. Then, without warning, the train screeched to a halt. The sudden stop threw Arjun forward in his seat. He caught himself before he hit the floor and looked around, confused. They weren't at a station, just in the middle of a dark tunnel. The lights flickered again, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. The whispers had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. "Hello?" Arjun called out, his voice shaky. "Is anyone there?" No response. He stood up, gripping the pole for support, and walked toward the front of the train. As he passed through the compartments, he realized something terrifying. The other passengers were gone. The seats that had been occupied earlier were now empty. Their occupants seemingly vanished without a trace. Panic set in. He rushed to the nearest emergency intercom and pressed the button repeatedly, but no one answered. The train remained still, the silence unnerving. Arjun's breathing became shallow as he tried to make sense of the situation. Where had everyone gone? Why was the train stopped in the middle of a tunnel? Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something move. He whipped his head around, but there was nothing there, just the dimly lit compartment. But he had seen something. He was sure of it. A shadow flitting just beyond the edge of his vision. He stepped forward cautiously, peering down the length of the train. A figure stood at the far end of the compartment. It was a woman, dressed in a tattered red sari. Her long black hair hung loosely around her face, obscuring her features. She stood perfectly still, her head slightly tilted as if she were listening to something only she could hear. The air around her seemed to shimmer, like heat rising off the pavement, but the temperature in the train had dropped significantly. "Excuse me," Arjun called out, his voice trembling. "Do you know what's going on?" The woman didn't respond. She remained motionless, her head still tilted in that unnatural way. Arjun's heart raced as he took a hesitant step forward. Something was wrong. The air felt thick, heavy, and every instinct in his body screamed at him to run. But he couldn't move. He was frozen in place, his eyes locked on the figure at the end of the train. Then slowly the woman raised her head. Arjun gasped in horror. Her eyes were pitch black, devoid of any whites or pupils. They were empty, soulless, and they stared directly at him. Her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile, her lips stretching impossibly wide to reveal rows of jagged, yellowed teeth. Before Arjun could react, the lights in the train went out completely, plunging him into darkness. For a moment, there was nothing, just the oppressive blackness and the sound of his own ragged breathing. Then the whispers returned, louder this time, filling the compartment with their malevolent presence. They swirled around him, echoing off the walls, seeping into his mind. He stumbled backward, his hands fumbling in the dark for something, anything to hold on to. But the train was no longer still. It was moving again, hurtling forward through the tunnel at a terrifying speed. Arjun could feel the motion beneath his feet, the screeching of metal on metal as the train raced through the night. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. They were everywhere now, pressing in on him, suffocating him with their intensity. He clutched his head, trying to block them out, but it was no use. They were inside his mind, digging into his thoughts, his memories, twisting them into something unrecognizable. Then, the woman's voice cut through the chaos. Arjun. He froze. It was impossible. She couldn't know his name. But there it was, clear as day, spoken in a voice that was both familiar and utterly alien. He turned around slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. The woman was right behind him. Her eyes, those horrible, empty eyes, bore into his soul. Her smile widened, stretching her face into a grotesque parody of a human expression. Arjun stumbled backward, his mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening, but there was no time. The train lurched violently, throwing him to the ground. His head slammed against the cold metal floor, and for a moment, the world blurred. When his vision cleared, the woman was gone. The train had come to a stop again, this time at an unfamiliar station. The platform was dimly lit and the air was thick with a palpable sense of dread. Arjun staggered to his feet, his body trembling, and made his way to the door. It slid open with a hiss, revealing the station beyond, but something was wrong. The station was ancient, decrepit, as if it had been abandoned for decades. The walls were cracked and covered in grime, the tiles on the floor chipped and broken. The air was stale, carrying the faint smell of decay. But the most unsettling thing was the silence. There was no sound of footsteps, no distant hum of electricity, just an oppressive, eerie quiet. Arjun stepped out onto the platform, his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced around, searching for any sign of life, but there was none. The station felt wrong, like it existed outside of time, a place that shouldn't be. Then, from the shadows he heard it, a soft, childlike giggle. Arjun's blood ran cold. He turned toward the sound, his eyes scanning the darkness. In the far corner of the platform, just beyond the reach of the dim lights, he saw a figure. It was small, hunched over with its back to him. It rocked back and forth, giggling softly, its voice echoing in the empty station. "Hello?" Arjun called out, his voice barely a whisper. The figure stopped giggling. Slowly it turned around. It was a child, a young boy, no older than 6 or 7. But something was terribly wrong with him. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes were the same pitch-black voids as the woman's. His mouth curled into a wide, unnatural smile, and he began to walk toward Arjun, his bare feet making no sound on the cold floor. Arjun backed away, his heart racing. His mind screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to obey. The boy kept coming, his smile growing wider with each step, until he was only a few feet away. Then he spoke. "Join us!" Arjun screamed. The lights in the station flickered and the whispers returned, louder than ever. They filled the air, swirling around him, suffocating him with their intensity. The boy's smile twisted into something monstrous as his hand shot out, grabbing Arjun's wrist with an iron grip. In that moment, Arjun felt it, the darkness, the malevolence. It seeped into him, wrapping around his soul, pulling him down into the abyss. And then, everything went black. The next morning, the Delhi metro ran as usual. Commuters filled the platforms, boarding trains, chatting, and going about their lives. No one knew of the horror that had unfolded the night before. In the driver's compartment of the Blue Line train, the operator found something strange. The emergency button had been pressed repeatedly, but there was no sign of any disturbance. The cameras showed nothing unusual, just an empty train moving through the tunnels. But deep beneath the city, in the forgotten corners of the metro, something waited. And every night, when the last train left the station, it hunted for new passengers to join its ranks. The Delhi metro was never just a means of transportation. It was a gateway, a doorway to the other side, and once you crossed over, there was no coming back.